This photograph is possibly one of the most famous and iconic images of the Battle of Normandy, and even of the entire Second World War. It was taken on June 9, 1944, in the small town of Rotz, located about 10 kilometers west of Caen. It was there, in what was later known as Otto Funk Alley, which, by the way, I was able to make visible recently on Google Maps, where the famous report by the Waffen SS correspondents that has gone down in history was carried out. But what do these photographs hide? What is the story of the soldiers who appear in them? What exactly happened at Rotz? Well, this is exactly what we are going to analyze next. June 6, 1944. The Allies begin their great amphibious assault on the beaches of Normandy. The British and Canadians land in front of Caen and Bayeux. The Americans do it in Omaha and on the Cotentin Peninsula. In front of them were German infantry divisions that, with the exception of the 352nd Division, could do little or nothing to slow down the Allied advance. In the rear, there were a series of Panzer divisions with more combat capacity, which began to head towards the beaches as soon as they received the order. The first to arrive at the combat zone was the 21st Panzer Division, which was in the vicinity of Caen, going into action against the British vanguard during the afternoon of June 6th. On the other hand, the 12th Division of the Waffen SS, known as the Hitlerjugend Division, was located between Paris and Caen, about 150 kilometers from the Norman beaches. This German elite division had its origin in early 1943, and boys between 17 and 18 years old who belonged to the Hitler Youth were recruited. To give the unit more strength, veterans from the Leibstandarte Division joined it, who trained and would later lead the young boys in combat. After months of hard training, the Hitlerjugend Division was declared fit for combat in March 1944. At that time, it had about 20,000 troops and just over 200 tanks. As we will see below, among the 20,000 troops of the division were 2nd Corporal Otto Funk, Private Klaus Schuh, 1st Class Günther Hammel, 2nd Sergeant Paul Kozlowski, Captain Rudolf von Ribbentrop, Lieutenant Colonel Max Wünsche, or Private Gert Krieger. The vanguard of the Hitlerjugend Division began to arrive in Normandy during the last hours of June 6th. Because the remains of the 716th Infantry Division and the 21st Panzer Division were located north of Caen, the men of the Hitlerjugend Division were positioned west of Caen. In front of them was the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division advancing towards Caen. The first confrontation of the soldiers of the Hitlerjugend Division against the Canadians took place during the morning of June 7th. At around 7:45 hours, the Canadian vanguard had crossed the towns of Buisson and Biron until they finally reached the town of Authie, located about 3 kilometers from the outskirts of Caen. Just a kilometer and a half away, from the tower of Ardennes Abbey, Kurt Meyer was observing the Canadian advance towards the sector in which his men had positioned themselves. It was then, between 8 and 9 in the morning of that June 7th, when Colonel Kurt Meyer ordered his regiment to launch against the vanguard of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. What came next was pure hell. The Canadians described the battle that followed as savage and brutal. During the battle, the Canadian vanguard was overwhelmed by armored and infantry elements of the Hitlerjugend Division. Due to the determination of the Waffen SS boys, the Canadians were forced to abandon Authie and retreated towards Les Buissons, located about 4 kilometers further north. This is how the initial Canadian advance towards Caen was stopped cold that morning of June 7th. One of the commanders of the Canadian Division even commented as follows: "We have been preparing for this moment for years, only to have now been stopped by a unit made up of teenagers." In that first confrontation with the Hitlerjugend boys, the Canadians lost the commanders of 3 companies, and at the end of the battle, only 8 of the 20 original officers of the rifle companies remained. The unit's total casualties that morning reached 650 men. From here, both divisions began to receive reinforcements and were established along a broader front line. The Hitlerjugend Division General Fritz Witt arrived in the sector during the early hours of June 7th and commented the following: "I have been on the road for 8 hours, and 4 of them I spent in the ditches because of the air attacks. The division's marching columns are suffering many losses in men and material." 2 days later, a few kilometers away, some Waffen SS correspondents carried out a report that would go down in history. This report took place in the small town of Rotz, about 4 kilometers southwest of Authie, where the men of the 25th Regiment of the Hitlerjugend Division were recovering from the brutal fighting of the previous days. In the first photo, you can see 2nd Corporal Otto Funk in the foreground and Private Klaus Schuh to the right of him. Otto Funk and Klaus worked together as an MG-42 machine gun crew during the early days of the Battle of Normandy. Both received the Iron Cross for shooting down a Churchill tank that had been loaned to the Canadian Army. Using their MG-42 machine gun, they aimed their tracer bullets at the Churchill's fuel tank, causing a fire that destroyed the enemy tank. A few days after the report, Otto Funk was seriously injured and had to be evacuated from Normandy. However, he would fight in future operations in which the Hitlerjugend Division participated, such as the one in the Ardennes in December 1944, or those that took place in Hungary during the last weeks of the war. Despite everything, Otto Funk survived the war and lived until 2011. However, his companion Klaus was not as lucky as him and died in combat in Normandy on June 26th, trying to contain Operation Epsom. In the second photograph, taken focusing on the same angle of the alley, we can see 1st Class Gunther Hamel and 2nd Sergeant Paul Kozlowski, belonging to the 25th Regiment of the Hitlerjugend Division. Again, the soldier Gunther Hamel that we see in the foreground carries an MG-42 machine gun. Next, in the third photograph, which was also taken in the famous alley, we have Captain Rudolf von Ribbentrop and Lieutenant Colonel Max Wünsche. The two of them are on the motorcycle. Ribbentrop is the one in the sidecar with his injured arm, and Wünsche is the one driving it, who is also injured in the head. Ribbentrop, son of the German foreign minister, was one of the oldest men in the Hitlerjugend Division at only 23 years of age. Ribbentrop was a veteran of the Eastern Front, having participated in both Manstein's counteroffensive at Kharkov in February 1943 and the Battle of Kursk, fighting in the Leibstandarte Division. It was during these combats where he won the Knight's Cross. Like many other officers of the Leibstandarte Division, Ribbentrop was transferred to the Hitlerjugend to increase the seniority of the young unit. After the Normandy campaign, Ribbentrop continued to participate in each new battle of the Hitlerjugend Division, both in the Ardennes and in Hungary in 1945. Finally, he died in 2019 at the age of 98. Regarding Max Wünsche, we have to indicate that he was also another veteran of the Leibstandarte Division who had been transferred to the Hitlerjugend during the summer of 1943. After fighting for 2 months in Normandy, Wünsche was captured trying to escape from the Falaise pocket, ending the Second World War for him in this action. After being liberated by the British, the German lieutenant colonel lived in Germany until his death in 1995 at the age of 80. And finally, we have the last 2 photographs in which we see the Panther tank on the street perpendicular to the alley. In the photograph, we can see the Panther with the number 326, on which a young, very blonde soldier named Gert Krieger is riding. Although it cannot be seen very well in the photo, Krieger was cleaning the tank in which his commander Eismann had recently died, which had been hit by a projectile while he was leaning out of his hatch. In general terms, the Hitlerjugend Division continued fighting in Normandy for the next 2.5 months, again and again stopping Montgomery's attempts to break the front in the vicinity of Caen. The German defense finally collapsed in mid-August, following the launch of Operation Cobra and Operation Totalize, and the remnants of the Hitlerjugend Division were then instrumental in keeping the small corridor near Falaise open. Well, while I say goodbye to the program, I leave you with the video that I was able to record in the alley itself, which, thanks to Google Maps allowing me to indicate its location, This place is being increasingly visited by fans who go to Normandy.